Hello there everybody and welcome to this channel. My name is Savvy and for today we're going to be working on a squirrel. So get your reference images ready, get your drawing pads or whatever you're using to work on these projects and let's get started. So this is what we're trying to get at the end of this video. We're trying to have our sculpt look a lot like this, something close to this. So there's nothing really incredibly special about this little fella. Besides the fact that we can use rodent images as references along with squirrels because they're just very similar. But this is what we're trying to get at the end of this. Obviously, if you're having problems, you can always go back to your sculpt and try to refine certain things and revise all the issues that you probably have. So usually I tend to actually just have base mesh or like basic geometry to kind of block out the animal that I am currently working on. For the squirrel, I just wanted to actually just have some proper topology. This helps, as I've mentioned in previous videos, that this helps when it comes to adding in detail, like adding in a multi-surface, a multi-resolution, or adding in subdivisions and all that. It actually helps when your mesh doesn't really break that much. So having proper topology at the get-go, from the get-go, it just kind of helps you to have a lot of control over the details that is going to go into the sculpt or the animal that you're currently working on. This doesn't go just for animals. If you're doing like stuff like hard surface, creatures, humans and all that, or organic stuff, you would usually want to have proper topology from the beginning. But like I've said before, if you know that your end result or the final sculpt will just be used for something minuscule such as a background feature of another scene that you'll be working on, or if the main sculpt itself just isn't going to move, it's not going to be animated or anything like that, you just kind of want to have the sculpt done and then have still renders and just be done with it later on. You can totally just have improper topology and just go crazy with the divisions, the subdivision levels. Well, obviously you have to work with what you can, but usually I tend to just have a proper topology. With previous videos, I was just trying to experiment, seeing which way could be possibly faster, either modeling out the topology yourself or having basic geometry to block out the animal that you're working on, or using metaspheres, for example. I do remember we worked a little bit with metaspheres in previous videos, and what I did find is that this is just what I'm comfortable with. I would like to just have proper topology right at the beginning and then start sculpting. But if you know that your sculpt, you have to do something like incredibly fast, then you can totally have basic geometry or like basic shapes to block out the shape of your animal or your subject or whatever you're working on. But usually I just recommend having proper topology right at the beginning. Also, by the way, whilst doing topology like this, or even when you're using basic shapes, such as spheres and everything, when you feel like you have finalized the mesh, the base mesh, and you add in a multi-resolution modifier, that should be it. You have to make sure that the mesh is correct. It does what you want it to do. The topology is okay, or even if the topology isn't okay and you're just going to remesh everything later on, or use some kind of like retopology add-on or something like that, or just using Blender's base remesher, you have to make sure that everything is fine and you're never going to come back and edit the vertices or like the edge flow or anything, or adding in edge loops. I believe you can probably add in edge loops, but you can't delete anything. Once you add in the multi-resolution modifier, that should be it. You shouldn't come back and edit anything on the vertices or the vert count of the mesh. You could only just move things around, resize them, and that's it. That's usually because the multi-resolution modifier has data that it stores into the modifier, and if you alter the vert count or you go in and delete things, you add in new vertices and whatever, it could break the multi-resolution modifier and the mesh itself. and you'll see, just have like a test run, go into an empty Blender scene and start editing things into a mesh that already has the multi-resolution modifier. Edit things such as adding vertices or deleting vertices, and just adding in triangles or something like that. Just mess around and you'll see how the multi-resolution modifier reacts. It will tend to break. If it doesn't, then you're lucky, but it usually does. So you don't want to do anything major like that. The only things that we're going to edit on the mesh is just resizing and moving things around. So as you can see here, we're going into the sculpt. We've already entered the sculpting phase. So I just wanted to come in and start sculpting. What I usually do, I sculpt in the animal with the skin on. I don't start by sculpting the echo shade. I start by adding in like details, and I start thinking about what the animal would look like with skin and just without fur or feathers or anything like that. And then I come into the echo shade details, such as the muscle groups and all that. This sculpt was a pretty quick one. I didn't spend a lot of time working on this actually. So the reason behind that was, usually I tend to, before I work on these kind of projects, I tend to have like a practice run. So I would sculpt something on the side, either in Blender or in ZBrush, and just play around. Usually that just gets me ready for the actual project that I'm going to be working on, so I don't have to like do a lot of research on muscle groups and all that, because I've already done it in the practice sculpt that I would have worked on in private. So I don't mean that you have to do this. You don't necessarily have to do this all the time before you start working on a sculpt. I mean, you probably need to do things quicker than I do, but I just do that. I just do like have little practice runs every now and then. It's almost the same as when you're painting or drawing. You usually just want to do like some light sketches, and then you come into the main project that you want to work on, and then you actually refine it later on. So that's what I was doing. I just do that just to get my hands and mind ready for the sculpt that I'm going to be working on, that I'm going to be focusing on. So like I said before, the squirrel references, I use some rodent references as well. You can also do this with other animals. I did explain long ago that if the animal is similar, such as a hippo and a pig, for example, like, but sometimes it doesn't really, they aren't really that similar. With a hippo and a pig, you'll probably find that it's just the size and like some proportions are quite similar. But usually you can get references from other animals, and you can work using those references, such as the kangaroo video. I did use some human references. I had some in my mind, and I had them loaded into PureRef, and I used those as references as well. So you don't always have to use the animal's reference that you're working on, such as the squirrel. You don't always have to use like only squirrel references. You can kind of do extra research, finding out what they're similar, what their muscle groups are similar to, what kind of animals they're similar to, and then use those references. So we use rodent references here, like a rat, and then we use obvious squirrel references. I believe you could also probably use references from a hare or a rabbit or even a kangaroo. I think for the face, you could probably use a kangaroo's reference. What you can see here right now, I'm starting to shape the squirrel to my liking. You could actually see from the side view, it actually looks like a rat a little bit. So what I did was I reduced the size of the ears, and then I just morphed the face around to have it looking like an actual squirrel, because before I believe it just kind of looked a lot more like a kangaroo than a squirrel. And then for the tail, what I do sometimes, if you find like tails are really thin, the tail of the animal that you're working on is too thin, you can actually just puff it up using the inflate brush, and then probably if you want to reduce it later. So you puff it up and then you add the details that you want, and then you reduce it using the inflate brush. But you should be careful if you puff something up with the inflate brush that's already detailed, and if you increase the volume, it will overlap on itself. so it'll collapse on itself, like the crease details that you added in there will kind of just go deeper in, and then the outer layer, or like the outer shape of the detail that you added in, will just kind of puff up and then overlap with the other side. So just be careful when using the inflate brush. So right now we're already in the refining stages. This wasn't a hard sculpt to work on. Usually when you're used to working on a lot of animals and a lot of sculpts, you'd find it really easy to work on the next, especially if it's similar to the previous one that you were working on. The difficult one that I did work on was the rhino. There were just certain muscle groups that I just wasn't getting for some reason, because like the orientation and the size was just different. But yeah, if you found this very helpful and you enjoyed this video, then please like and please subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.